The 42nd floor of the Meridian Tower shimmered under golden chandeliers, casting a warm glow over Manhattan's glittering skyline. Inside, the Tech Innovation Gala was in full swing, a grand celebration of power, wealth, and ambition. Industry giants shook hands, clinked champagne glasses, and made million-dollar deals as the elite of New York paraded in their finest. But just outside the entrance, Sarah Mitchell stood still. In her modest beige dress and simple pearl earrings, she looked nothing like the other women stepping out of black cars in designer gowns and diamonds. At 38, Sarah carried herself with quiet grace, her blonde hair pulled into a classic chignon. She wasn't here to impress. She was here to support the man she had built a life with, her husband, Michael Mitchell. She held her invitation carefully, Mrs. Sarah Mitchell, guest of honor. It had arrived 3 weeks ago, a surprise from Michael. "Your work deserves to be celebrated too," he'd said over breakfast. "I'll meet you there straight from the airport." But now, at the registration desk, her name was not on the list. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the receptionist said, eyes scanning the digital guest sheet again. "There's no Sarah Mitchell listed." "There must be a mistake," Sarah replied, calmly but firmly. "My husband is Michael Mitchell. He's being honored tonight." The woman gave her a tight, professional smile, one, the kind you give when you've already decided someone doesn't belong. "Let me call our coordinator." Moments later, Victoria Henderson arrived, sleek, sharp, and dressed in midnight blue. She gave Sarah a look from head to toe that said everything without words. She inspected the invitation, lips pursed. "I oversee every name personally," Victoria said coolly. "There's no Sarah Mitchell here." Sarah's patience began to fray. Michael arranged it himself. "Yes, I know, Mr. Mitchell. He's attending professionally. These events are reserved for appropriate companions." The word appropriate hung in the air like a slap. Gasps, whispers, laughter behind manicured hands. Some guests openly stared, others turned away, embarrassed for her. "You think I forged this?" Sarah asked, her voice low but steady. "I'm not saying that," Victoria replied, clearly meaning exactly that. "But security will have to escort you aside." A uniformed guard stepped forward, and just as Sarah opened her mouth to respond, a voice cut through the crowd. "Excuse me, what's going on here?" Every head turned. From the elevator strode a man with purpose. Tall, confident, commanding. Michael Mitchell. His tailored suit spoke of power, his eyes of fury. Victoria's confident tone immediately shifted. "Mr. Mitchell, so glad you're here. We were just—" Michael held up a hand. He didn't need theatrics. His presence silenced the room. "This woman," he said, walking to Sarah and gently placing his hand on hers, "is my wife." Dead silence. Victoria's face drained of color. She received this invitation because she earned it, because she's the reason I'm able to do what I do, and because she's spent the last 8 years lifting others while expecting nothing in return. Michael turned to the staff, the guests, and the stunned Victoria. "Let me make one thing very clear. If Sarah isn't welcome, then neither am I." The tension shattered like glass. The security guard stepped back. The receptionist looked mortified. Victoria tried to recover, but the damage was done. Whispers turned into apologies. Heads bowed in sudden recognition. Michael looked at Sarah, his voice softening. "Let's go inside. Together." And as the doors opened, it wasn't just the room that stood in awe. It was the whole industry. Not of Michael Mitchell, but of the woman they had just underestimated.
The security guard instinctively stepped back. Around them, an uncomfortable silence settled. A few guests glanced at each other awkwardly, realizing they just witnessed something shameful, the public humiliation of a woman who, it turned out, wasn't just anyone. "Your wife?" Victoria Henderson stammered, her practiced elegance crumbling like fragile glass. "Yes," Michael Mitchell said calmly, now standing beside Sarah. "Sarah Mitchell. The woman whose name I personally ensured was at the very top of your VIP list when I confirmed our attendance, 3 weeks ago." Victoria's hands trembled as she scrolled frantically through her tablet, her flawless confidence now in tatters. "Mr. Mitchell, I assure you, there must be a technical error. Our system is usually—" "Is it?" Michael interrupted. His voice remained polite, but there was steel beneath it. "Because from where I'm standing, it seems your system failed miserably. My wife was denied entry. Her invitation was questioned. And worse, she was treated like she didn't belong." By now, a larger crowd had gathered, drawn by the slow-motion unraveling of what had started as a quiet dismissal, but had turned into something far more dramatic. These weren't just any guests, among them were industry leaders, tech CEOs, venture capitalists, and media figures who would remember this night. "Mr. Mitchell," Victoria tried again, now desperate to control the narrative. "Perhaps we can discuss this, privately." "Oh, I think we're past that," Michael replied, lifting his phone from his inner coat pocket. "I've been in meetings all day, finalizing a major acquisition. Even from Chicago, I received a very interesting message from my assistant." He tapped the screen and brought up an email. His voice never wavered. "Apparently, your office called mine yesterday, requesting that certain names be removed from tonight's guest list. Names that didn't reflect the professional standards of the event." The crowd inhaled collectively. I don't know what you're implying," Victoria said, her voice shaking. Michael raised a hand to silence her. "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. You deliberately removed my wife's name because you assumed she didn't belong. You made a judgment, based on appearance, on modesty, on your own narrow definition of status." He scrolled again. "Here's the email. Sent yesterday, 2:47 p.m. Please advise Mr. Mitchell that his +1 should reflect the professional caliber of the event. Adjustments to the guest list may be necessary to preserve our standards." Victoria looked like the ground beneath her had just vanished. Michael took a step forward. "You failed to understand something important. My wife is not my +1. She's Sarah Mitchell, founder of the Mitchell Foundation for Educational Excellence. A woman who's helped over 2,000 underprivileged students receive scholarships in the last 5 years." He lowered the phone and looked Victoria in the eyes. "She's also the woman who convinced me to donate $50 million to education last year instead of buying a yacht. But more relevant to this room, she's married to the man who owns 47% of the company hosting tonight's gala." The air shifted. The ballroom jazz music felt too loud, the silence among the crowd too complete. Michael turned slightly. "Let me repeat that. I own 47% of Henderson Events Management, the company that bears your family name." Victoria's knees visibly wobbled. "Mr. Mitchell. I had no idea, if I had known." "If you had known, you'd have treated my wife with respect," Michael said sharply. "But that's exactly the problem. You only offer respect to people who can benefit or hurt you. That tells me everything I need to know about your leadership." He turned to the watching crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to properly introduce my wife, Sarah Mitchell. She chose to dress modestly tonight, not out of ignorance, but out of principle. She believes in substance over flash. She chose a taxi over a limo because she thinks extravagance should never come at the cost of humility." Scattered applause turned into a wave. Powerful figures began stepping forward, not toward Victoria, but toward Sarah. Some offered their apologies, others their admiration. Several asked to speak to her about future collaborations. Victoria stood frozen, pale, shaking, alone. As majority shareholder, Michael added, "I have serious concerns about this company's guest relations protocols. We'll be addressing them, in detail, tomorrow morning." He turned back to Sarah and gently offered his arm. "Shall we go in, darling? I believe they're about to announce tonight's honorees." As they walked toward the ballroom, Victoria followed in a panic. "Mr. Mitchell, please, let me explain. It was a communication error. I meant no disrespect." Michael paused and turned back once more, his voice cool. "A communication error? Is that what we're calling discrimination now?" The crowd began filing in behind them. But the buzz had already started. Everyone was talking, not about the keynote speaker, not even about the company awards. They were talking about what had just happened at the entrance. That night, Sarah Mitchell's quiet dignity did more than make a statement, it changed the atmosphere of an entire event. As they reached the ballroom, Sarah finally spoke. Her voice was gentle, but every word landed like a lesson. "Mrs. Henderson," she said, "I don't need your apology. Your actions tonight revealed everything I needed to know. I just hope next time you're about to judge someone by how they look, you'll remember this moment." Victoria could only nod, her eyes glistening with tears. "You made several mistakes," Michael added. "You assumed she wasn't important. You implied she didn't belong. And worst of all, you did it in public." At that moment, a prominent venture capitalist stepped forward. "Michael, we need to talk about Portland," he said before turning to Sarah. "And Mrs. Mitchell, I've heard so much about your foundation. I'd love to explore a partnership." Within minutes, other CEOs and executives gathered around the couple, eager to show which side they were on. Victoria watched from a distance, completely isolated. "Mr. Mitchell, please," she tried one last time. "My family has run this company for 3 generations. And that ends tonight," Michael replied flatly. "By morning, Henderson Events will be under new leadership. I suggest you start updating your resume." The ballroom doors closed behind them. The rest of the night belonged to Sarah and Michael, not because of their wealth, but because they reminded an entire industry that class is not worn, it's lived. As they left later that evening, Sarah leaned gently into Michael's shoulder. "Thanks for standing up for me." "Always," he said. "But honestly, you handled it beautifully before I ever got there." She smiled. "I know who I am. And after 8 years with you, I've learned one thing, real power isn't about putting others down. It's about lifting them up." And with that, they stepped into the night, two people who proved that true grace isn't something you buy, it's something you carry.